I retired and bought a cottage in Muskoka to finally find some peace. Then my daughter-in-law called. My parents are moving in for the summer. If you don't like it, list it. I didn't argue. But when they showed up, they found exactly what I had prepared for them. Let me tell you what 41 years looks like. When you add it all up, it looks like the same alarm going off at 4:47 every morning, 6 days a week for 4 decades. Over time, slips folded into a drawer, cashed every quarter, moved immediately into a savings account. I promised myself I would not touch until I had earned the right to spend it on something that was entirely permanently mine. I worked at a steel plant in Hamilton, structural fabrication. I started on the floor at 22 and spent for decades there, ending up running a department of 32 people who trusted me to call the job right every time. My name is Frank Whitlock. I am 64 years old. I have one son, Elliot, who I love without condition. I was married to his mother for 19 years. She passed away when Elliot was 22, and I have not fully made peace with that loss. I expect I never will. Elliot married his wife 7 years ago. I will use her name once, Sienna. After that, I will call her my daughter-in-law, which is what she was legally for a period of time that turned out to be shorter than either of us expected. I retired in April. My pension was solid, my savings better, and the plan had offered a package that was a respectful send-off for 4 decades of work. I drove out of that parking lot for the last time with something in my chest I hadn't felt in longer than I could remember. Room. I felt like there was room. I had been looking at properties in Muskoka for 3 years, methodically with a spreadsheet and a shortlist and an agent named Brian who understood I was not going to be rushed. The cottage on Lake of Bays was the 8th property I viewed. 3 bedrooms, a boathouse with a good roof, a cedar dock that needed 1 new crib, 2 hectares of forest running down to the shoreline. The water was clean. The nearest neighbor was 400 MOA close. Enough for safety, far enough for silence. I made an offer that afternoon. The lawyer slid the final page across the polished oak desk. Congratulations, Mr. Whitlock. You're the owner of one of the prettiest places on the lake. $465,000. Every cent I had saved. I unpacked the evening I arrived the way I'd run every job at the plant. Tools in the boat. House, each in its place. Books sorted by subject. Kitchen organized by function. By the time the sun went down, I had a coffee made and a Muskoka chair pulled to the end of the dock, and the loons were calling across the bay. I rang Elliot. He answered on the second ring. You earned this, he said. 41 years, Dad. You earned every board. Foot, something I had been carrying for a long time, loosened in my chest. That was Thursday. The call came Friday evening. I was back on the dock when her name came up on the screen. She didn't ask, she informed. Her parents needed somewhere quiet. Their condo had water damage. I had 3 bedrooms and only one of me, which she seemed to find morally objectionable. If I had a problem with it, I could list the cottage and go back to Toronto, where I'd be, quote, actually useful. The line went dead. 36 hours. That's how long my peace had lasted. I went inside and sat down at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, and the mechanical pencil I'd used on structural drawings for 20 years. I wasn't designing a bridge, trust this time. I was designing something else. Entirely, I have a process for problems. Define the actual problem, not the surface one. Identify every resource available. Determine what each resource can and cannot do. Build a plan that accounts for failure at every step. The surface problem my daughter-in-law had decided her parents were moving into my cottage. The actual problem, I didn't yet know what tools she had or what she was willing to use. I called my insurance broker first. Doug had handled my policies for 30 years. I asked exactly who is covered under my new cottage policy if undeclared long-term occupants moved in. His answer was clean. Undeclared residents staying past 30 days could void my liability coverage entirely if anything happened on the property. Any additional occupants needed to be declared in writing. Premiums adjusted. He sent me that in writing within the hour. I printed it and put it in a file folder labeled Cottage Legal. Then I called a lawyer in Huntsville, Joe and Routledge Jr. Partner. Direct, no wasted words. I laid out the situation like a project. Summary. No emotion, just facts. Her answer. No legal obligation whatsoever to house your sons-in-laws. This is your property. If they arrive and refuse to leave after you've asked them to, that is trespassing under the Trespass to Property Act. The OP will remove them. I paid her retainer by check that afternoon. $3,000. 40 years of careful living meant I could do that without blinking. Next morning, I drove to a hardware shop in Bracebridge and bought 3 motion-activated cameras, cash, night vision, photo straight to your phone within 30 seconds of activation. I installed all 3 myself, one in a white pine covering the driveway, one under the boathouse eave, one above the front door, tested each unit, adjusted angles until sight lines overlapped with no blind spots. The engineer in me was satisfied. I also logged every call and text from my daughter-in-law in the days that followed. There were 2 follow-up messages asking me to confirm I'd be at the Huntsville bus terminal on Friday. I let them go to voicemail and noted them in the log. I called Elliot once that week on a Wednesday. He answered carefully the way he'd been answering my calls for months. I didn't tell him about the cameras or the lawyer. I told him I loved him and asked how work was going. She told me you'd agreed to it. He said when I asked if he knew about his wife's plan, she told you incorrectly. I said, but I'll handle it. He was quiet for a moment. Okay, he said, I'm sorry, Dad. You don't have anything to be sorry for, son. Friday came cool and gray. I was on the dock with a history of the Muscoa Mills district when my phone showed a text from my daughter-in-law sent the night before. Parents arriving Huntsville bus. Terminal 1145. Be there. No question. Mark. No, please. At 11:45, I was on page 63. At noon, her name came up on the screen. I let it ring to voicemail. At 1 o'clock, Elliot called. I picked up Dad. Sienna's parents are stranded at the bus terminal in Huntsville. She said you were supposed to collect them. I never agreed to collect anyone. I said the Same way I never agreed to let them move. And there's a Best Western in Huntsville and a Delta in Bracebridge. They have options. A long exhale. Dad, please. Just for a few. The answer is no, son. I know that puts you in a hard spot, but I'm not going to be responsible for promises your wife made without my consent. He let out the kind of breath that comes from a man who's been holding it too long. I'll talk to her, he said. Send them my regards. 2 hours later, the driveway camera sent a photo to my phone. A rental car coming up the gravel road. Silver midsize Ontario plates. I watched on the small screen as it rolled into the clearing and stopped. Both doors opened. Her father got out first. Gordon Ashworth. I'd met him perhaps 10 times in 7 years at holiday dinners. At the wedding, once at a summer barbecue. A tall man mid-60s with a broad, settled bearing of someone accustomed to being the most important person in the room. Before he'd closed the car door, he was already walking the property, moving slowly around the boat, house, and the dock with the particular quality of attention a man gives. Something he is deciding the value of. His wife, Beverly, stepped out of the passenger side, small, precise, with an expression suggesting she was doing the cottage a favor by being there. I set down my book and walked up from the dock. I met them on the porch with my hands in my pockets. I had rehearsed. Nothing. There was nothing to rehearse. Gordon, I said. Beverly, there's been a serious miscommunication. I never agreed to collect you from Huntsville, and I never agreed to have you stay here. I want to be direct about that. Before anything else is said, Gordon's smile cooled. He set his weekender bag on the porch step with the careful deliberateness of a man intending to leave it there. Come on now, Frank. We're family. Sienna and Elliot both think this is the right solution. You've got 3 bedrooms and you're one man. It's selfish to turn us away. Selfish. I let the words sit in the air between us. 41 years at a steel plant, 3 decades of overtime, canceled holidays, missed school plays, every cent saved until I had earned the right to spend it on something that was mine. And this man, who had attended perhaps 10 of my family dinners, was standing on my porch, calling me selfish. I looked at him for a moment without speaking. Then I said, I have a solicitor in Huntsville who has advised me on the trespass to Property Act. If I ask you to leave and you refuse, the OP will remove you. I'm asking you to leave now. You have 5 minutes before I make that call. Beverly touched her husband's arm. Gordon, let's go. We'll call Sienna. She'll sort this out. Gordon held my eye. This isn't over, Frank, he said. He said it quietly, the way men say things they want remembered. I know, I said. He picked up the weekender bag. They walked to the car. The engine started. The rental reversed down the gravel road and disappeared into the birch trees. I went inside and pulled up the camera footage. Every word of that conversation recorded, every second timestamped. I saved the footage to 3 separate locations and noted everything in the log. My phone began ringing inside the hour. My daughter-in-law first voicemail, then again 4 minutes later, voicemail, a text in 3 fragments. You have humiliated my parents. They are devastated. This is not what family does. Then Elliot, I picked up on the second ring. Dad. His voice was careful. Can you tell me what happened? I told him exactly. In order. She told me you'd agreed. He said that. You'd said it would be fine. She told you incorrectly. A silence. Dad, I'm caught in the middle and I don't. No, you're not in the middle. I said, you're my son. I handled it. It's done. For now. It's not done, he said quietly. She's going to make this. I know, I said. I'll be ready. That night I sat on the dock with a dram of Crown Royal and watched the stars come out. I had expected to feel something like satisfaction. What I felt was closer to the tiredness that comes after a demanding job is done correctly. I was right that she wasn't finished. People like that never are. The next 3 weeks were quiet in the way that a site is. Quiet between a detected fault and a full equipment failure. Nothing visible on the surface. Something working steadily toward a conclusion underneath. My daughter-in-law called 6 more times in the 10 days after the confrontation. I answered none of them. I transcribed the relevant content from each voicemail into my log and saved the audio files. The tone progressed in the way these things do. Disbelief, anger, ominous. Calm, then a return to what presented itself as reasonableness, but was preparation for a different angle of attack. The last voicemail she left ended with, Elliot and I have been speaking with a family lawyer about our options going forward. We want to resolve this amicably, but I don't think you fully appreciate the impact of your behavior on this family. I forwarded it to Joanne Routwash. Joanne called the next morning. The family lawyer angle is worth watching, she said. In some circumstances, family pressure is used to push an aging relative toward decisions about property that benefit the pressure applying party. Keep documenting everything. If she escalates, I want a complete record. I kept documenting. In parallel, I made the cottage more mine. I replaced the dock crib, worked 4 mornings on the timber, treated and set it myself. I built a proper tool wall in the boat house. I restained the porch steps. I fished off the dock each morning and found the not catching as peaceful as the catching. I did not hear from Elliot for 12 days. When he finally called on a Sunday evening, he sounded exhausted. Dad, I owe you an apology for not calling sooner and for not warning you how bad things had gotten. Bad how? He was quiet. The condo water damage story. There is no water damage. I found out last month the condo was repossessed. Her parents missed 8 months of mortgage payments. She didn't tell me the truth because he stopped. I don't know what. She thought I do, but she didn't tell me. When did you find out? 3 weeks ago. And then the thing with you happened and I should have said something. She told me you'd overreacted, that her parents were innocent and you'd been unreasonable. I wanted to believe that. I don't think I believed it, but I wanted to. I thought about saying something direct. Instead, I said, I've known men at the plant who got the same number wrong twice because the first time felt easier than correcting it. He understood. We're both quiet people. He said, we let things go too long. Sometimes. I said, what are you going to do? I need to figure that out. I think I need to see you. Come whenever you want, son. You know the way. He came. The following weekend, he arrived on a Saturday afternoon looking like a man who had been sleeping badly for months. Not disheveled. Elliot was never disheveled. He had his mother's instinct for keeping himself together, but there was a tiredness in his face that went deeper than a missed night or two. His eyes had the look I knew from the plant floor, the look of a man who has been monitoring a problem so long that his baseline has shifted and he stopped. Registering the strain, I handed him a beer from the cooler by the boathouse door. Without a word, we walked out to the dock. A family of mansers was working along the reed bed. A kingfisher rattled past low over the water. We sat there for a while without talking. Elliot spoke first. I've been lying to myself, he said. Not about one thing, about a lot of things. For a long time, he told me the shape of it. When her parents first came to stay, she'd said 3 or 4 weeks. He believed her because he wanted to and had no reason not to yet. By the time he had reasons, he'd already adjusted, each week slightly worse than the last. The increments small enough that he'd never marked the moment it became something he wouldn't have accepted in the beginning. How long have they actually been with you? I asked. He told me nearly 5.5 months by then, and the money he was quite longer than I expected. He had a house fund he'd been building for 3 years. He named the amount that remained. It was low, much too low. My chest did something I didn't show on my face. She didn't ask me, he said. She just moved it in amounts I didn't notice. Week to week, the bank flagged a large transfer and I looked at the statement. Have you confronted her? Yes, she said. Her father needed it, that it was family, that I would have said no if she'd asked, and she couldn't let her parents be in that position. I said nothing for a while. The kingisher rattled back the other direction. How much do you know about her parents? Actual situation? I asked. Not the version she gave you, the real one. He looked at me. Not much. Why? I had made the decision in the days before his visit, turned it over, considered whether it was mine to tell. The answer had always been the same. He was my son. He was drowning in something I could see from the shore, and the only thing I had that could help him was the truth. I know someone, I said, who does background work, public records, financial filings, former police. After the situation at the cottage, I had her look into Gordon's background. Elliot went very still. I went inside and came back with the printed report. He picked it up, read it slowly. I watched his face move through confusion, then recognition, then the particular look of a man seeing a photograph of himself that he didn't know existed. The condo, he said, it says the unit was repossessed in February. Yes, that's before they came to us. Before the water damage story. The water damage story was never true. He read on, reached the section on Gordon's bankruptcy filing. Went still again. He declared bankruptcy, an import-export business, free. Years ago, Elliot set the papers down and looked out at the lake. She knew all of this. He said she knew her father was bankrupt when she told me the condo needed repairs. She knew he was quiet for a long time. How many people has she done this to? It can't just be us. The stories are too clean. The way she structured it. So I never had a single clear moment where I could say, this is the line. It was always incremental, always just barely tolerable. He looked at me. That's not a person making bad decisions out of love for her parents. That's a person who knows how to do this. I didn't argue with him. He was right. And he'd gotten there himself. We stayed on the dock until the light was almost gone. I fried the smallmouth. I'd caught that morning. We ate on the dock with the lamp behind us and the dark. Water in front and the loons calling. Back and forth across the bay. He stayed. Through Sunday, we took the boat out. Caught a lake trout on the deep shelf. He held it up for a moment. That full attention you give something when you're not thinking about anything else. Then lowered it back into the water and watched it go. When he left Sunday evening, he hugged me longer than usual. I love you, Dad. I know, son. I love you too. I watched his tail lights disappear. Then I went inside, sat at the kitchen table and thought about what I knew and what was almost certainly coming next, because there was more. I was certain of it. The report covered Gordon's public records. It did not cover my daughter-in-law and the engineering Elliot had described, the careful incrementalism, the stories that held up in isolation. That was not the work of someone acting out of desperation. It was the work of someone with practice. I called Louise Tremble. On Monday morning, I need more. I told her this time on my daughter-in-law. Employment, finances, anything you can find. Then I went outside and split a cord of firewood I didn't need yet. Because there's no better way to think clearly than doing work with your hands that you already know how to do. Louise Tremble delivered her report on a Friday, 2 weeks after I'd asked. What? Arrived first was a phone call, not a PDF, which told me before she said a word that the findings were significant. We talked for 40 minutes. The first finding, my daughter-in-law had been let go from her agency job in February. The same February the condo was repossessed. The agency had posted the position publicly 2 weeks after her departure. She had not secured new employment in the month since. Her LinkedIn profile still listed the agency as her current employer. She hasn't told Elliot. I said, not according to anything I can find. The second finding transfers from an account held solely in my daughter-in-law's name, funded through a line of credit. I asked whose name the line of credit was in. Louise told me Elliot's name. I said, yes. The line of credit had been opened 2 years earlier. The balance drawn almost entirely to the limit was slightly over $40,000 combined with the transfers Elliot had already found in the joint account. The total damage was approaching $80,000. The house down. Payment he'd been building for 3 years. Gone and then some. The third finding, Louise had located a filing from Gordon's bankruptcy dispute regarding a personal loan from a private individual, a name that matched a relative on my daughter-in-law's mother's side. The dispute had been resolved and the individual dropped from the filing. Louise was not certain what it meant. It could indicate the family had done something similar before, used a sympathetic relative to establish a loan record, then discharged the debt in bankruptcy. It could be coincidence, she said. It could be, I agreed, but it's a pattern worth being aware of. I sat with the printed report for 3 days. The question I was turning over was not what I knew. It was what I owed. Elliot was my son, a grown man entitled to the privacy of his own mistakes, including the mistake of trusting someone who didn't deserve it. There was a version of what I'd done where I was a meddling old man who'd hired investigators to run surveillance on his son's wife. I was aware of that version, but there was another version. In that version, my son was being quietly bankrupted. In that version, there was a line of credit in his name that he didn't know existed. In that version, his house was never going to happen, and the finding would be worse for the delay. The truth doesn't get cheaper with storage. I drafted the email to Elliot on a Sunday night. Short, direct. Subject line, you need to see this. I attached the report, added 3 sentences of context, told him where the information came from and why I'd sought it. I told him I was sorry to be the one putting it in front of him. I told him I loved him. I sent it at 10:17 at 4:32 Monday morning. My phone hung. Elliot's voice was hollow the way a room is hollow when everything that made it a room has been removed. It's all true, he said. I confronted her. She admitted it. The job. She's been sitting in the lobby of her old office building with her laptop 2 or 3 mornings a week. I thought she was working. She was keeping up appearances. He stopped the line of credit. She said she opened it too years ago because she knew I'd say no to the amount, and she planned to pay it back before I found out. I asked what she was planning to pay it back with. She didn't have an answer. I'm sorry, son. She said, you deserve the welfare report. He said, I asked her about it. It was in your documentation, and she said, you deserved it for humiliating her parents. So it was her from her phone. She'd been tracking your routine from your social media before she filed it. I thought about the nurse who'd come for the welfare check, her quiet observation that the report contained suspiciously specific detail about my daily habits, built apparently from the photos I'd posted in those first weeks at the cottage. I wouldn't be posting anymore, Dad, just my name with everything underneath it. I know, son. She lied to me about everything, not small things. He paused and I let her. I keep asking myself, what kind of person lets that happen? What kind of man doesn't notice? A man who trusted his wife, I said. That's not enough of an answer. No, but it's the true one. He came up the following weekend. He came that Friday with more in his trunk than he'd brought before. A duffel bag, a box of books, his fishing rod. He didn't say what it meant. He didn't have to. We spent the weekend differently than the one before. Less talking, more working. We fished in the mornings, worked on the dock cribs. In the afternoons, ate whatever we caught in the evenings. Physical work. That doesn't require conversation. The kind that clears the head. On the Sunday evening over cribbage by the fire, he told me he was moving out of the condo. That week, her parents were still there. He couldn't be in the same space as Gordon and Beverly. Couldn't be in the same space as her. Not until he knew what he was doing next. Where will you go? There's a place in Etabacoke. Short term. He pegged his points. I've talked to a lawyer. Not about the marriage yet. About the line of credit. If she opened it in my name without my signature, that's fraud. What did the lawyer say? Strong case. And depending on what a Forensic accountant finds she's recommending one to look at the joint. Finances going back 3 years. There may be more. He looked at his cards. Dad, she's going to try to claim a stake in the cottage. Her lawyer mentioned it. The transfers to her parents, characterized as loans to you with an interest in your property as security. Was this mentioned formally? Her lawyer sent a letter. Forward it to Joanne. Tonight. I will. He paused. She's also saying you took advantage of a family dispute to hire a lawyer against her. Before she had representation, Joanne will know how to handle that. The retainer was paid before the confrontation at the porch before your wife took any action against me, and the camera footage documents the confrontation in full, including the trespassing attempt. Joanne has copies of everything. He was quiet. How did you know she'd escalate? I've been watching her for 7 years, I said. The same way you watch a plant process over time. You notice what happens when something doesn't go as expected. She doesn't redirect. She doesn't reconsider. She pushes harder. He nodded slowly. That's what she's been doing to me the whole time. I kept thinking if I gave a little more, agreed to one more thing, she'd stabilize. She never stabilized. No, I said. She found the floor of each concession and asked for the next one. He was quiet for a long moment. Dad, he looked at the fire. When she showed up at the cottage, I was told you'd been cruel and unreasonable. I didn't fully believe her, but I did not believe her either. And I should have believed you. You were her husband, I said. That carries obligations. Believing her was one of them until you had enough reason not to. We played out the hand. He beat me by 4 points, which he hadn't managed in years. In the weeks that followed, Joanne rattled received the letter from my daughter-in-law's lawyer. She called me the next morning. The framing of the transfers as loans to you is creative, Joanne said, but there are no loan documents, no evidence of any agreement, and you never received any money. The characterization doesn't survive scrutiny. They may file something hoping you'll settle rather than defend. But if they do, I'll respond and it will go nowhere quickly. She also mentioned the welfare report. The file had been closed as unfounded, but Joanne wanted to confirm, had I given anyone reason to believe I was struggling in any way that might have justified it? No, I said. Then someone filed it dishonestly with the intention of using a welfare check to support a narrative of vulnerability that constitutes elder abuse under the Adult Protection Services framework. And in any court proceeding, it would reflect very badly on whoever filed it. Elliot can confirm it was her. I said she admitted it to him directly. Get that in a signed statement, even informal. I called Elliot. He wrote the statement that evening and emailed it to Joanne's office. When he confirmed it was sent, he said, that's the strangest thing I've ever written. Strange to write. I said, strange to have happened. Dad, he said, strange is the wrong word. Strange implies accidental. None of this was accidental. No, I agreed. It wasn't. I went out to the dock after that call and stood in the dark for a while. The Milky Way was fully visible. The kind of clear you only get this far from a city. The loons were quiet. The lake was still. I had come here for Quiet. The quiet I'd found was different from what I'd imagined. It was the quiet that comes after you've said the true thing when the true thing was expensive. I didn't regret the expense. The divorce took the better part of 8 months. I was not a party to it, but I was present in it the way a parent always is in the major undertakings of their children. Elliot called most Sundays. He came to the cottage most other weekends. He told me what he could. The forensic accountant found $83,000 in total. He told me on a Thursday evening in October, sitting on the dock with a blanket over his knees because the nights had turned cold. A beaver was working somewhere in the reed bed. The sound of gnawing carrying across the still water. 83,000, he said, including the line of credit and the joint account. Transfers and 3,000 on a personal credit card in my name. I've never seen a statement for. When was the card opened? 18 months ago. He said the number with the flatness of something said too many times already. Is that the end of it? The accountant thinks so. She's done too. Passes. He turned his bottle slowly. The line of credit is the interesting one. Legally, there's no signature of mine on the original application. Her lawyer has gone very quiet on that subject, which tells me everything. You mean she forged your signature? He nodded once without looking at me. I set that down somewhere in my chest and didn't take it back out. The cottage claim has gone nowhere, he said. Her lawyer dropped it last month. Joanne sent me the letter. No viable claim, no documents, no evidence of an agreement. And Joanne had made clear that if they filed anything, they'd be filing it against the full weight of the camera footage and the admitted welfare report and the forensic findings. Her lawyer apparently advised strongly against proceeding. I thought about what Joanne had said months earlier. The pattern had been identified early enough to document. The documentation had made the pressure prohibitively expensive to sustain. The engineer in me found this satisfying in the specific way that a correctly anticipated failure mode is satisfying, not pleasant. Correct. She's going to try to contest her own pension too, Elliot added. Her former employer made contributions to a plan that she'd been drawing from while listed as a current employee after being let go. The lawyers are describing it as a secondary matter. One thing at a time, I said. One thing at a time. We sat for a while. I want you to know something, Elliot said, about why I'm up here so much. He looked at the water. In the city, there are two. Many places that have her in them. The coffee shop on the corner, the park, where we used to walk the market on Saturday mornings. The whole neighborhood has become a map of something I'm trying to understand. And every time I walk it, I have to understand it again. Here, there's nothing. Here is just you and the lake and the trees, and none of it has her in it. There's nothing here that requires you to understand anything. I said, yeah. He looked at me. I want to stay up here, not with you. I know you need your space and I need mine, but near Bracebridge, Huntsville. I want to start again somewhere that isn't full of what I'm trying to get past. That's a big decision. There's a marketing firm in Bracebridge, Regional Accounts, Arts Council, Tourism. It's not Liberty Village. It would be a step back in terms of the career path people in my field are supposed to want. And in terms of the life you actually want, he smiled. Exactly in the direction I want. Then it sounds like the right direction. He came up the following month with a manila envelope. Inside was assigned. Offer from the Bracebridge firm. He'd accepted before he drove up. Not to. Presented as done, but because he'd known for 3 weeks it was what he wanted and had been waiting for the right moment to say so. I read it carefully. Marketing coordinator, regional. Accounts, salary lower than the city. Office on the Main Street Inn. Bracebridge, 12 minutes from my dock. I put it back in the envelope and handed it to him. You're certain? He was certain. I poured 2 bourbons and we sat by the fire. I told him about the night I'd driven out of the plant, parking lot for the last time, and what it had felt like to let something go that had taken a long time to admit was ready to be let go of. When I was done, he said, what did it feel like after? Like room, I said. Like there was room. He nodded slowly. That's what I'm looking for. He found a flat in A, converted Victorian on Manitoba Street. In Bracebridge, I drove down to help him move in. 4 hours of carrying boxes, 6 hours of eating sandwiches at the kitchen table and talking about nothing. In particular, the way moving days should go when they go right. He started the new job on the first Monday of December. He called that evening and I could hear in his voice under the tiredness something that hadn't been there in a long time. Room, I said. He laughed. Yeah, he said. Room. The divorce was finalized in the spring. Elliot drove up the evening after he signed the final papers with a bottle of 30-year Glen Farloss he'd been saving for. Something. We poured 2 measures and took them to the dock. The ice had been out of the bay since mid-April, and the loons had come back as they always did, navigating from wherever they'd spent the winter to this same bay, this same /4 mile of shoreline. Some knowledge is built so deeply into a creature it doesn't have to think about it. It just knows the way home. She walked away with the condo furniture and her parents' debts, Elliot said. Whatever was left in the joint account, the forensic findings are documented and on record. If she opens any credit in my name going forward, there's a fraud case waiting. And Gordon and Beverly there with her. She found a rental in Oakville after they were essentially evicted from our condo. I gather Gordon has some kind of work again. He paused. You think, yeah, very little feeling about it, which I think is the healthiest thing I've managed in years. We were quiet for a while. The loons were calling their territorial call across the far end of the bay. I have always known this water. 2 males working out the boundaries for another season. Dad, Elliot said, I've been trying to say something for a while and keep not saying it. Say it. He looked at his glass. You didn't have to do what you did. Any of it. Most people, when a daughter-in-law calls with something unpleasant they argue about it, or they give in and it becomes the shape of the family. You documented everything. You got legal advice. You got a PI. You made yourself a difficult target because you were right and because you knew the cost of not acting would be worse than the cost of acting. I looked at the water. I also did it. I said, because you were in trouble and I could see it and I didn't want to watch you go under. He was quiet. I kept out of your marriage for 7 years, I said. I watched things that worried me and kept my mouth shut because it was your marriage, and your choice, and I had no standing. When she made it about my property, she gave me standing, and I used it. He was quiet for a long moment. I was drowning, he said. Finally, I just couldn't see it because I'd adjusted to being underwater. I know. And you threw me a line without making me feel like I needed to be rescued. That's the only kind of help worth giving. He turned the glass in his hands. Mom would have loved this place, he said. The dock, the loons. She would have been out here every morning. Yes, I said she would have. We sat with that for a while, and let it be. The following spring, Elliot showed up with a passenger I had met, a woman, tall, auburn hair, an open and direct quality about her, not guarded, not performing, just exactly what she appeared to be. She worked at his firm and Bracebridge graphic design, Cora. They'd been together several months, she said, which told me from Elliot's expression that it had been longer than he'd admitted. I showed her the dock and the boathouse and the stand of old white pines along the east boundary. She asked good questions about the trees, how old they were, about the lake in winter. Not polite questions, questions from genuine curiosity. Do you fish? I asked. Never tried it, but I can learn. Elliot looked at me the way he used to when he was small and had done something he hoped I'd approve of. I handed her a rod. She caught the boat, housed twice, and laughed both times. Not the embarrassed laugh of someone performing good sportsmanship, but the genuine laugh of someone finding something funnier than they expected. By mid-afternoon, she had the cast figured out and was landing the fly in a right water most of the time. That evening, after Ka had gone in to start dinner, Elliot sat beside me on the porch. She's nothing like Sienna, he said. No, I said. She isn't. Is that good? I think it means she's herself, I said, which is a better place to start. They got engaged. The following October, a small dinner on the lake in Gravenhurst. A question asked quietly, a yes without hesitation. Elliot called me from the parking lot, his voice carrying the warmth of a man who has arrived somewhere he wasn't sure he'd get to. The wedding was 50 guests on a clear October afternoon overlooking Lake Muskoka. I gave a speech that made Cora's grandmother laugh and Cora herself cry. When I sat down, the grandmother leaned over and said in the direct manner of a woman in her 80s who has no time left for indirection, "You've done a good job with him." He did it himself, I said. She looked at me. They always say that, she said. It's never entirely true. I thought about that on the drive back to the cottage that night, what it means to have done something right as a parent, how impossible it is to know in the moment, how slowly the evidence accumulates. I thought about Patricia, who should have been in the car beside me, who would have had opinions about the centerpieces and the menu and the shade of Cora's dress. All of them kind. I missed her with the clean, uncomplicated grief that comes eventually when you've made enough peace with a loss to stop fighting it. I thought about 41 years at a steel plant and what they were actually for and what I had built with them, not the cottage. That was a result. What I had built over for decades of showing up and doing the work correctly was a set of habits that had held in the moment they were tested. The habits of documentation, of legal preparation, of not giving away what had been earned, of standing still when Pressure was applied and letting the pressure reveal itself for what it was. The habits had held. That was the thing. I turned down the gravel road and the headlights picked up the dock and the dark water beyond it. I parked and sat for a moment with the engine off. The loons were calling. I had come to know this pair by the slight variations in their call. There is a particular quality to the tremolo of the birds who hold this bay that I recognize the way you learn to recognize a colleague's voice on a crowded plant floor. This was my water. I knew this water. I went inside, made a pot of tea, sat at the kitchen table with the yellow legal pad, and found for the first time since moving in that I had nothing to write on. Nothing to plan for, no. Contingencies to map, just the cottage, the lake, the sound of loons on the water, the life I had built. And Elliot came up most weekends that summer. By August, she was casting better than Elliot had learned in 3 seasons, which I told him and which he took with good humor. They talked over dinner one evening in September about children. Someday, they said, looking at each other the way people look at each other when the someday is closer than they're admitting. When that happens, Elliot said, I want them to know this place, to learn to fish off your dock, to know their grandfather. I had to look out at the water for a moment. I'd like that, I said. I'd like that a great deal. Cora reached across the table and put her hand briefly on mine. Thank you, Frank, she said, for raising a man worth loving. After they left on the Sunday, I sat on the dock until full dark, listening to the loons. I thought about what I had gone through, the manipulations, the legal threats, the welfare report, the battle I hadn't wanted and couldn't avoid, and what had come out the other side. A son who trusted me, a future daughter-in-law who saw me clearly, the chance to know. Grandchildren on a cedar dock on a lake. In Muscoa, Sienna and her parents had tried to take it all. They had used every tool available to them, and they had lost. Not because I was clever or wealthier, but because I had refused to give away what had been earned in exchange for a peace that was never real. I had said no when everyone expected a yes. I had stood on the ground I'd bought with 41 years of early mornings, and I had not moved in the end. I had gotten back more than I'd imagined possible. I stood up, worked the stiffness out of my knees, and walked inside. Outside, the loons had gone quiet. The lake had settled into that deep, glassy stillness that only a Muscoa night can give you. I picked up the phone and called my son just to say good night, just because I